A Passage to India. This is the first continuation of Chapter 2. A servant announced dinner. They ignored him. The elder men had reached their eternal politics. Aziz drifted into the garden. The trees smelt sweet, green-blossomed champak, and scraps of Persian pottery came into his head. Dinner, dinner, dinner. But when he returned to the house for it, Mahmud Ali had drifted away in his turn to speak to his sayis. "Come and see my wife a little then," said Hamadullah, and they spent 20 minutes behind the purdah. Hamadullah Begum was a distant aunt of Aziz and the only female relative he had in Chandapur, and she had much to say to him on this occasion about a family circumcision that had been celebrated with imperfect pomp. It was difficult to get away because until they had their dinner, she would not begin hers, and consequently prolonged her remarks in case they should suppose she was impatient. Having censured the circumcision, she bethought her of kindred topics and asked Aziz when he was going to be married. Respectful but irritated, he answered, "Once is enough." "Yes, he has done his duty," said Hamadullah. "Do not tease him so. He carries on his family, 2 boys and their sister." "Aunt, they live most comfortably with my wife's mother, where she was living when she died. I can see them whenever I like. They are such very, very small children." "And he sends them the whole of his salary and lives like a low-grade clerk and tells no one the reason. What more do you require him to do?" But this was not Hamadullah Begum's point, and having courteously changed the conversation for a few moments, she returned and made it. She said, "What is to become of all our daughters if men refuse to marry? They will marry beneath them, or—" and she began the oft-told tale of a lady of imperial descent who could find no husband in the narrow circle where her pride permitted her to mate, and she had lived on, unwed, her age now 30, and would die unwed, for no one would have her now. While the tale was in progress, it convinced the 2 men that tragedy seemed a slur on the whole community. Better polygamy, almost, than that a woman should die without the joys God had intended her to receive. Wedlock, motherhood, power in the house. For what else is she born? And how can the man who has denied them to her stand up to face her Creator and his own at the last day? Aziz took his leave, saying, "Perhaps, but later." His invariable reply to such an appeal. "You mustn't put off what you think right," said Hamdullah. "That is why India is in such a plight, because we put off things." But seeing that his young relative looked worried, he added a few soothing words, and thus wiped out any impression that his wife might have made. During their absence, Mahmud Ali had gone off in his carriage, leaving a message that he should be back in 5 minutes. But they were in no account to wait. They sat down to meat with a distant cousin of the house, Mohammed Latif, who lived on Hamdullah's bounty and who occupied the position neither of a servant nor of an equal. He did not speak unless spoken to, and since no one spoke, kept unoffended silence. Now and then he belched, in compliment to the richness of the food. A gentle, happy, and dishonest old man, all his life he had never done a stroke of work. So long as some one of his relatives had a house, he was sure of a home, and it was unlikely that so large a family would all go bankrupt. His wife led a similar existence some hundreds of miles away. He did not visit her, owing to the expense of the railway ticket. Presently, Aziz chaffed him, also the servants, and then began quoting poetry, Persian, Urdu, a little Arabic. His memory was good, and for so young a man he had read largely. The themes he preferred were the decay of Islam and the brevity of love. They listened, delighted, for they took the public view of poetry, not the private which obtains in England. It never bored them to hear words. Words. They breathed them with the cool night air, never stopping to analyze. The name of the poet, Hafiz, Ali, Iqbal, was sufficient guarantee. India, 100 Indias, whispered outside beneath the indifferent moon. But for the time, India seemed one and their own, and they regained their departed greatness by hearing its departure lamented. They felt young again because reminded that youth must fly. A servant in scarlet interrupted him. He was the chaprassi of the civil surgeon, and he handed Aziz a note. Old Calendar wants to see me in his bungalow, he said, not rising. He might have the politeness to say why. Some case, I dare say. I dare say not. I dare say nothing. He has found out our dinner hour, that's all, and chooses to interrupt us every time in order to show his power. On the one hand, he always does this. On the other, it may be a serious case, and you cannot know, said Hamadullah, considerately paving the way toward obedience. Had you not better clean your teeth after Pan? If my teeth are to be cleaned, I don't go at all. I am an Indian. It is an Indian habit to make Pan. The civil surgeon must put up with it. Mohammed Latif, my bike, please. The poor relation got up. Slightly immersed in the realms of matter, he laid his hand on the bicycle saddle, while the servant did the actual wheeling. Between them, they took it over a tin tack. Aziz held his hands under the ewer, dried them, fitted on his green felt hat, and then, with unexpected energy, whizzed out of Hamdullah's compound. Aziz, Aziz, imprudent boy! But he was far down the bazaars, riding furiously. He had neither light nor bell, nor had he a brake. But what use are such adjuncts in a land where the cyclist's only hope is to coast from face to face, and just before he collides with each, it vanishes. And the city was fairly empty at this hour. When his tire went flat, he leapt off and shouted for a tanga. He did not at first find one, and he had also to dispose of his bicycle at a friend's house. He dallied furthermore to clean his teeth. But at last he was rattled toward the civil lines with a vivid sense of speed. As he entered their arid tidiness, depression suddenly seized him. The roads, named for victorious generals and intersecting at right angles, were symbolic of the net Great Britain had thrown over India. He felt caught in their meshes. When he turned into Major Calendar's compound, he could with difficulty restrain himself from getting down from the tanga and approaching the bungalow on foot. And this not because his soul was servile, but because his feelings, the sensitive edges of him, feared a gross snub. There had been a case last year. An Indian gentleman had driven up to an official's house and been turned back by the servants, and been told to approach more suitably. Only one case among thousands of visits to hundreds of officials, but its fame spread wide. The young man shrank from a repetition of it. He compromised and stopped the driver just outside the flood of light that fell across the veranda. The civil surgeon was out. But the sahib has left some message. The servant returned, and indifferent. No. Aziz was in despair. It was a servant whom he had forgotten to tip, and he could do nothing now because there were people in the hall. He was convinced that there was a message, and that the man was withholding it out of revenge. While they argued, the people came out. Both were ladies. Aziz lifted his hat. The first, who was in an evening dress, glanced at the Indian and turned instinctively away. Mrs. Leslie, it is a tanga, she cried. Ours? Inquired the second, also seeing Aziz and doing likewise. Take the gifts the gods provide anyhow, she screeched, and both jumped in. Oh, Tanga, Walla, club, club. Why doesn't the fool go? Go. I will pay you tomorrow, said Aziz to the driver. And as they went off, he called courteously, You are most welcome, ladies. They did not reply, being full of their own affairs. So it had come, the usual thing, just as Mahmud Ali said. The inevitable snub, his bow ignored, his carriage taken. It might have been worse, for it comforted him somehow that Madams Callender and Leslie should both be fat and weigh the Tonga down behind. Beautiful women would have pained him. He turned to the servant, gave him a couple of rupees, and asked again whether there was a message. The man, now very civil, returned the same answer. Major Callender had driven away half an hour before. Saying nothing? He had, as a matter of fact, said damn Aziz, words that the servant understood, but was too polite to repeat. One can tip too much as well as too little. Indeed, the coin that buys the exact truth has not yet been minted. Then I will write him a letter. He was offered the use of the house, but was too dignified to enter it. Paper and ink were brought on to the veranda. He began, Dear Sir, at your express command, I have hastened as a subordinate should, and then stopped. Tell him I have called. That is sufficient, he said, tearing the protest up. Here is my card. Call me a Tanga. Huzur, all are at the club. Then telephone for one down to the railway station. And since the man hastened to do this, he said, Enough, enough. I prefer to walk. He commandeered a match and lit a cigarette. These attentions, though purchased, soothed him. They would last as long as he had rupees, which is something. But to shake the dust of the Anglo-India off his feet, to escape from the net and be back among manners and gestures he knew, he began to walk, an unwanted exercise. He was an athletic little man, daintily put together, but really very strong. Nevertheless, walking fatigued him, as it fatigues everyone in India except the newcomer. There is something hostile in this soil. It either yields and the foot sinks into a depression, or else it is unexpectedly rigid and sharp, pressing stones or crystals against the tread. A series of these little surprises exhausts, and he was wearing pumps, a poor preparation for any country. At the edge of the civil station, he turned into a mosque to rest. And we'll pause here and continue with this story in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.